All right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Major John Howell, and I'm joined with the mighty Major Tom Haydock, a lot smarter than me. Hey, by the way, I'm working on growing a mustache during this time of the month, No Shave November, so please don't hold that against me. But I wanted to kind of fit that into an example about the topic we're about to talk about, sort of. We're going to talk about the culture of maneuver warfare. And the reason why we're talking about this is because culture matters. If you don't have the culture, you can't get your soldiers and your organization to do the things that you want to do as a commander. So how I link that back to a mustache, every AT I've done with the Army National Guard has been with ACO 1 of the 161, the Mighty Axe Company, and they have a tradition where they grow a mustache and they have a contest 2 weeks out of the year, every FY. I did not participate last time because I had an NCO who says he hates a mustache more than the Taliban, but maybe next year I'll get in on that. But with Major Haydock, we're going to relate this discussion kind of back to the tenets of mission command. So Tom, I'm going to let you lead, and I'm going to play your little puppet and bring up examples that I've had from command. So take it away, Tom.
Let's do it. Who doesn't love to be a puppeteer? And I feel like I have to address the elephant in the room, which of course would be the mustache. I myself am not participating in No Shave November. I don't grow a great mustache. I think mine probably beat yours, but I'm also not a great mustache grower myself. I've done it in the past, and it's not great either. But mission command underlies the approach to maneuver warfare and creating that culture of maneuver warfare. In the United States Army, we have identified 6 principles of mission command. Those 6 being mutual trust, a trust between the led and the leader, between the subordinate and the commander, and also between adjacent commanders, that they have the mutual trust in each other to do what they say they're going to do and be at the place that they say they will be at the time that they will be there and act in good faith to each other. We talk about shared understanding as the second one. Shared understanding being that everybody knows what the purpose of the event is for, why the mission is happening, and what is supposed to happen at the same time. So instead of taking the approach of, I'm going to limit the amount of information that I put out, I'm going to overshare things because I want everybody to have the exact same picture in their mind of what success is supposed to look like. The third one being commander's intent. Commander's intent is, what is the commander trying to do? In previous versions of our doctrine, we talked about key tasks being part of it, but now it's the expanded purpose as well. Why are we doing what we're doing? And
if I can just butt in as a puppeteer, as an intel guy, I've got to talk about the National Training Center, which the brigade is going to, in the future coming 2 years. But that was kind of the first. I've never deployed as an infantryman, so I never experienced combat that way. So NTC is what I think of as a young lieutenant, because that's what I did. And it's awesome when you have a commander that can understand those first 3 tenets and applies them. And you really get into, I think, especially like the cohesive team with the mutual trust. When you've got your platoon out on, I know I've talked about it in a previous video, but Hill 780, or in a certain FOB out there in NTC, you are alone by yourself. Hopefully you have comms with your commander, but when you have a commander that understands how important those first 3 tenets are, it pays off so much for you and your soldiers. And I got to experience that the first time. I wouldn't say I had the best NTC experience. There were highs and lows, personally for myself. But from my commander, Captain Sean Scott, now Lieutenant Colonel, he did those things as an armor guy. And he wasn't a Ranger tab guy, but with deployments to Iraq, with 3rd ID, and he was able to create that environment. It just pays off huge for a subordinate and in turn for your subordinates, So I just wanted to put that in there as my puppeteer approach.
Perfect. And John, I know you've got some good examples. What do you think mission orders are, and what does it look like to receive the mission order?
Well, as a former S3 in recruiting, I always think back, to the written order that you crank out, for certain events. But I think it's more than that, because obviously, like at the company level, when I went to the National Training Center, we weren't typing out, banging out orders on a computer and then doing that. It was more the op order brief on the terrain model, then turn around and doing that with our platoon. But I think why that's such an important part of mission command is explaining the why, in detail to your soldiers and to yourself. And I always loved something about Captain Scott that he did was the importance of the back brief. I just hey, you're tired, but I'm still going to ask you these questions, or you're going to brief me, like, what are you actually doing on this terrain model? And I remember there were moments while there for that rotation, you briefed something wrong, and he's like, hey, I think we need to go over this again. So thinking out of it kind of outside of, just the written order, which staffs are doing, but explaining the why are we doing this operation, and talking through, kind of the branches and sequels as things, how the outfor reacts or the enemy reacts or does certain things. That really helped me as a lieutenant. I hope that explains it. All right, okay.
It does, and okay. I love it. The next two tenets of mission command are disciplined initiative and risk acceptance. And what I like about those two, disciplined initiative and risk acceptance, is I think that they correlate perfectly to mission orders. The mission order should explain the general concept of what you're doing. It doesn't get into exacting detail about you have to be at this exact place at this exact time or the operation comes undone. It doesn't get into that level of fidelity. And because it doesn't do that, it tries to explain what you're supposed to do and why you're supposed to do it, what you're trying to achieve as an effect. If you know that, that's when discipline initiative blossoms, because then you have that opportunity to say, okay, I think this is what my commander wants to achieve. Here's what I can do at this exact moment. Yeah. And with that risk acceptance, I know what the commander wants me to do. I have the opportunity through my discipline initiative. I'm going to accept this risk on my own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too, when we talk about this whole maneuver warfare and the culture, how much of it's developed during your training before you go to your test period, like whether it's National Training Center or mobilization where you're actually doing this. I know one thing we've talked about is what risk you'll accept with your training, and I can think back as a lieutenant, the thing you're always worried about, what you're going to get fired over, is what? A live fire, right? And it's so funny. I remember the first time I ever did a live fire. I was in a way, I was kind of like, man, it's so scripted. Like when my command sergeant major was running with my weapons squad, like, hey, you're going to set your support by fire here. I'm going to shoot an azimuth and show you your STZs. It was so scripted, I really wasn't faced with those decision points as a leader. But the following week, after platoon live fires are over, roll into sticks. And I'm up in the northern portion of Yakima, and it's like, okay, which way do I go? I had a lot of freedom to maneuver my platoon. Some things led to failure, some things were great successes. And it was, might I add, it was force on force against another platoon, which is so cool, because then you get to go back and talk smack to the other PLs. But I think that's an important thing to bring up, identifying what part of your training glide path, what's key. And I think for a big part for the maneuver warfare culture is the sticks. How do I get those leaders to do training that forces them to make a decision, which sometimes you can't really get to in the live fire situations or the scenario.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up live fires, because I also have an extreme pet peeve against live fires. Not that they don't have value, because they do have value, but they don't train decision making. Yeah. They train you to do the exact same thing, the exact same time, the exact same way over and over and over again as you do it dry, blank, and live. Yeah. I think of a live fire as like a high school play. When people do a high school play, they practice it until they get it perfect, because they want the audience to think it's flawless. And that's, I think, the approach that a lot of people take to live fires is, I've got to have this flawless performance. You go to this exact spot, you set up this machine gun on this rock right here. You see this rock? That's the one right there. Set up your machine gun there. Mm-hmm. I think that we lose the value of live fires in that way when we make them so scripted. Yeah. Some thoughts I've had over my years about how do you make a live fire more valuable is, well, can you put some decision making into a live fire? Mm-hmm. For instance, when the live fire is over, and do you have an opportunity at the end of a live fire to perhaps introduce some unscripted elements, like a casualty at that point, and conduct a unplanned CASEVAC where you're not shooting anymore and you don't have to worry about that risk, but you have to go through that experience of going through an unscripted CASEVAC scenario, which is very possible. Or what if you lose comms and you have to go through your real-life pace plan? Yeah. Usually when we do a live fire, you've got these perfect comms, and we can't do it because the radios aren't working, solve the live fire for 6 hours. But could we do it based off of our pace plan like we would do it in real life? There's all sorts of ways to unscript a live fire, I think, and it comes down to the culture.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say, when I was in 123 Infantry, the Tomahawks, we had a brigade commander and a battalion commander, excellent leaders. And I kind of experienced two different styles of brigade commander, from platoon live fire and then to company. And I noticed Colonel David Foley, who was, I think he's a general now, when we moved into the company live fires, we did experience those things. I remember I had a great squad leader, now a Green Beret, and they killed him on the objective. With live, well, not with live rounds, but during a live iteration, you know, in the trench. And it forced me as a PL. I was like, what do I do now? I just lost my stud.
I love it.
So it can be done, but it is very different. I think the Sticks does a better job of getting after that and forcing those tactical decisions. It's just easier to do, for sure. Can you talk a little bit about, I know you've had two company commands, Line and HAC, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. The importance of rewarding, you know, performance in that culture of maneuver, rewarding that at the command level.
Sure. Actually, the best example I had of rewarding a maneuver warfare approach actually wasn't when I was a company commander. It was when I was a battalion S3.
Okay.
So I had the opportunity to deploy to Poland with Battle Group, as part of Battle Group Poland with 3 of the 161 Infantry in 2021. And while we were there, we conducted Rifle Focus, which was a force-on-force competitive exercise. Just the fact that it was competitive, like you've experienced in your career, that's when all of the good ideas that were truly game-changing came out. That's when all the players that really wanted to contribute had their opportunity to make their mark. And instead of holding back, they gave it everything they could because they wanted Attack Company to win, or they wanted Cobra Company to win, or they wanted Bear Company to win. Yeah. And simply having that competition really drove out who was good. And from there, you could reward them through simple things like recognizing them at the formations. Hey, this is the person who did outstanding in maneuver warfare. This is the person that allowed us to conduct in a much faster arms room process and really get out the door quickly. And because we were able to do that, we preempted the enemy. And it's simple things like that. We, as a National Guard, I think overemphasize admin and bureaucracy, when in reality we exist to fight and win the nation's wars. And that's the kind of thing that we need to make sure that we properly reward that success in Sticks through Army Achievement Medals rather than who got the most people through MRC. That's the kind of thing you need to be rewarding and make that part of your culture.
Yeah, and I know in this brigade, the 81st Striker Brigade, which hopefully I'm back to by XCTC, but with Raven Focus, I know with Colonel Broyles, I mean, the way he's taking that approach, it's going to be force on force, you know.
Absolutely.
And I cannot wait for the competition that brews between 1 of the 161 and 3 of the 161. It's going to be awesome. So hopefully I'm back to the brigade by then. But Tom, I really appreciate you sitting down and talking through this. It's so key when we talk about the tenets of mission command and how it impacts the culture for maneuver warfare. And our next video we'll be doing, we'll have Colonel Broyles back. All right, that's a good thing. We'll be covering the filters of maneuver warfare. All right, we'll see you again. Thanks, Tom.